Hey guys, Matthew Palumbo here from Audiocontrol and Stinger Solutions. And on today's workshop, we have a special treat. We have brought in our director of audio, the one, the only, Gary Bell. We're going to talk today about what makes our Epic Pro lineup of speakers and tweeters, subwoofers, etc. special, how they were designed and conceived. And without further ado, let's bring on Gary. Hey, Gary. So thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate you coming on for today's workshop. The first thing that I think we kind of want to cover is what do you do for Stinger? Like, why are you involved in the team? What brought you in? And, what's your involvement with all of this pro audio stuff we're developing?
So I am the director of audio, as you know. Basically, I'm overseeing the kind of product roadmap and the vision for the future for audio control, and just identifying opportunities to grow as a company and to develop products that are useful and have purpose.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, today I think, we have some points that we want to cover when it comes to this new Epic Pro lineup. And, the first one I think we want to kind of lead into is we developed this tagline for this line, right? You were involved in that process, as was I. And our tagline was Street Loud, Studio Clear. Can you shed some light on, what it took to come up with that and why that tagline?
Yeah, well, the why is the most important part, and
Hmm.
pro audio has made its way into car audio. There's kind of two or three cases that people use pro audio drivers. One is that they just have a ton of bass in their car and their front end struggles to keep up. There's kind of the open show crowd that, that's where you're seeing tons of drivers in each door and opened up and just trying to create a party atmosphere and just throw sound as far and loud as you can. And I'd say those are probably the two main use cases. And in a lot of those cases, the sound quality kind of comes second. And with audio control's kind of history of starting out in car audio competition early on, and the sound processing, and really a focus on sound quality at an affordable price, I didn't want to come out with pro audio drivers that were just made to get loud. I wanted to focus on the sound quality and getting loud. And so those two had to work hand in hand. And that's kind of what led to the Street Loud Studio Clear tagline.
For sure. And I think, along those same lines, right? Audio Control has had this tagline of making good sound great. We could almost say making pro audio sound great.
Right,
But,
right.
along those same lines was, I know throughout the development process, I've talked about it a little bit here and there too in trainings and other events and such is, we have kind of a unique design, right? We have a unique design to our speakers. These Epic Pro mid ranges have not just a phase plug or a dust cap, they have a phase cap. So tell me more about the phase cap.
Yeah, so the phase cap is, when we go down this path into pro audio, there's kind of two styles of speakers that are common. One uses a phase plug in the middle of the speaker. That's pretty visible and common. The other use a dust cap, and there's pros and cons to each of those. I would say that the pros, when done right, and I have to emphasize when done right, of a phase plug is that it can help smooth out frequency response of a driver, and it helps reduce cancellation from one side of the driver to the other. Um, and the trade-off is you have less cone area, right? Because you have less radiating surface. And the downside of a phase plug is that you have an open voice coil. So in a lot of these vehicles, um, if you get something into that gap, you basically ruin the speaker. You have to destroy the speaker to get small fragments of metal or metal shavings out of the gap of the speaker. So kind of a trade-off there, between the output, the frequency response, and the durability of the speaker. And when we started, prototyping and developing the drivers, we tried both ways and did a lot of experimentation. And what we came up with was a dust cap that is shaped like a phase plug, but is actually a super lightweight pressed paper cap. And so this gives us the kind of the best combination of everything. The voice coil is protected. We get actually more surface area than a standard dust cap, and we get some of the benefit of the smooth frequency response.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I mean, it's a really cool design, and it's something that I personally haven't really seen done before or done often. So speaking of the performance of a dust cap versus a phase plug and such, can you shed some light on just the overall performance of this Epic Pro lineup?
Yeah, I think with most of the pro audio drivers, you're focusing on a few things to improve efficiency, right? That's the main difference between a normal uh, car speaker. And how we do that is we use a lighter weight cone. So if you'll notice, we use this pressed paper with glass fibers into it, um, pressed very tightly. It's very thin, very lightweight. We use a cloth surround, which makes it, again, easy to move. We use a spider that is very easy to move. It's just like, if we're going to push something, would you rather push a Mack truck or push, a Honda? I'd rather push a Honda than a Mack truck. And so we focus on keeping all those moving parts as light as possible. And at the same time, anybody who's ever had magnets in their hand and had them suck to something, the closer you get, the the stronger that magnetic force is. So we focus on precision in the gap between the voice coil and the top plate, so that the closer we can get that together and still have, linear motion without any scraping or rubbing, the tighter we can control that, the more magnet force we have, which equals more output when we keep that cone and everything light. The trade-off, usually, as you keep all of those components in that moving assembly lightweight, is that you have a higher resonant frequency and you don't play down as low. So the standard, I want to say a standard. There's a wide range of different approaches from different manufacturers on whether they're trying to play down further into the mid bass, or if they're trying to get frequency response. Some of these drivers have frequency response up, 10, 12, 14,000 hertz, with usable frequency response. Now, when you're using a tweeter, you don't usually need it quite out that far, and things can get kind of harsh up there if you don't do it right. So it's really balancing all of those things to get a driver that performs the way you want it to. For us, we chose to try to make a driver that extended to 10K and then would play down in the 150 hertz range, um, was the goal, and we actually got a little further.
That's awesome. And so what we end up with is a driver that has a little bit more punch to it, right?
Yep, definitely a little more punch, and because of the efficiency, when you use these drivers in a lower power scenario, so like most of like our 6.5s are rated at 200 watts RMS. If you use that in a 100 to 150 watt application, and you're crossed over in the 125, 150 hertz range, the driver sounds very effortless. You're not stressing it. You're utilizing the efficiency. It's just like power to weight ratio in a car. 300 horsepower in a Honda means a lot more than 300 horsepower in a Buick, right? Like you're moving something that's lighter and easier, and that effortlessness, I hope that's a word, effortlessness, is really what shines and makes the music enjoyable and dynamic to listen to. And again, you can put more power and just keep getting volume, volume, volume. But we're finding that there are more and more use cases where guys are using these higher efficiency drivers just to keep up with the bass in the cars. The bass in the car has gotten so much, I want to say, easier and better in the last 10 years, with the
Hmm.
way subwoofers are getting dialed in and Class D amplifiers are like super efficient and the price is coming down. We're seeing customers affording a lot more power than they used to. In my era, if you had 200 watts on your subsystem, it was, considered pretty decent, pretty average. And these days, I feel like every kid I hear banging on the blocks running 1,500 watts minimum.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so it takes more to keep up with that. And so that's like, when we did it, we did a shallow version that will fit in a bunch of OEM locations. I don't know how well you can see that, but this driver right here plays up high, handles a ton of power, but this is what you need to keep up with big bass. And that's,
Yeah,
again,
for
that's a
sure.
different, very different application than the, hey, I have 20 speakers in each door. This is, hey, I just want to replace my factory speaker, but I want the benefits of that high efficiency, effortless sound at high volume too.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think I remember the days of like, a dollar a watt used to be a pretty standard measurement of like, hey, if an amp is a dollar a watt, that's a pretty reasonable price point. And nowadays, I mean, if you were to charge a dollar a watt, it would be pretty insane for some folks. But
Yeah.
you talked about bass a little bit there, and I agree. I think it is, like you said, maybe not easier, but it's definitely less expensive today to make big bass than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And on the topic of bass, we've also developed this Epic X line of woofers. And, I was explaining to someone earlier that, the Epic X line is not necessarily specifically to be a pro audio subwoofer, but it does work well with our pro Epic Pro speakers. And so, tell us just a little bit about the Epic Pro, or excuse me, Epic X woofers, and kind of what makes those a little different from what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, so we got to Epic amplifiers because we sell a lot of epicenters. Epicenter is really the driving force behind audio control for a long time. Um, it really is kind of the Kleenex of bass restoration processing. And again, like anybody that's in business, we wanted to sell more amplifiers. So we wanted an amplifier that was suited well to go with Epicenter. And we know Epicenter customers can be, they're not all, but a lot of them are, we'll just say abusive. And so we did the Epic amplifiers that, have the Epic link and power and Epicenter. Really robust, value oriented. They're in a extruded chassis. They're not in a crazy chassis or anything that's expensive to build. So we were able to keep the cost down on those, and that went well. And then we needed a woofer to pair with those amplifiers, and the knowing the epicenter customer, the knee jerk reaction is to build a big, again, heavy Mack truck of a woofer with really stiff spiders and really stiff surrounds. That's one approach. The approach we ended up taking, again, after some experimentation, was going the exact opposite direction and kind of taking a little more of that pro audio style approach of the tight gap, the smaller coil. We focused on the cooling of the coil and the coating to keep the power handling up. They're rated at 500 watts on the 10 and 12. And we just focused on that efficiency and giving them enough mechanical excursion that you could drive the woofer right out of the gap and it doesn't make funny mechanical noises or anything like that. So we ended up with this, 500 watts. I beat them up with a little more than that in my car. You've heard that a couple of times.
Yep.
But you're able to drive this woofer as hard as you want to. We have an Epic 500 watt amp coming to go, to pair with a single, or the Epic 1000 pair with two woofers, and you can basically just beat them up and play even super low. And we wanted that kind of deep, efficient, woofer that was universal, works in a sealed box, works in a vented box, gets loud, plays down low without hurting it. And we were able to do that. And that's very different from just the pro audio style where you take out that low end to get efficiency, right? They're not 10 and 12-inch mid bass woofers. These are subwoofers made to
Right.
play low and get loud and take abuse.
Yeah, yeah, and I think abuse is the key word there for some customers. You mentioned a little bit about experimenting and some of that stuff. So take us through, what was the market research that was done? Obviously, Audio Control had not been really involved with pro audio in the car audio segment anyway, maybe a little bit in home in the past, but in the car audio segment in the 12-volt world, Audio Control was not a name that was synonymous with pro audio. And to be fair, really neither was Stinger. So, will you take us through just a little bit about like what kind of market research did we do there in California?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, anytime you're developing this, you put eyes out into the world and see what's working for other people, what isn't. And so we looked to the kind of leaders of this category and saw what they were doing. And um, it was really a mixed bag. There were certain things that I tested from other manufacturers that really impressed me, and other things that I was like, I can't believe that somebody is selling this. and people continue to buy it. So yeah, it really was a wide range. And then I focused more on benchmarking against true pro audio drivers than the car audio pro audio drivers. And that's because there is kind of a segment of those drivers that is geared towards the sound quality and efficiency side of things. And that's kind of where I focused my attention on other companies. Then for us, it was
Hmm.
just about experimentation and building and coming up with that right combination of parts. I always say that building an audio system and building a component of an audio system is a lot like building an engine of a car, and just having the biggest camshaft or the biggest crankshaft or the biggest piston. Any one of those things on its own doesn't do anything. It's about how you put that combination together and how well that engine runs and how much power it makes and all of those things. For us, it takes a little bit, just like cooking too, right? It's finding that right combination of ingredients that you could put a little too much of this or not enough of that, and all of a sudden something doesn't taste good. And it's just getting it to the point where you're happy with the taste of your recipe.
Yeah, I like that analogy, and I think when you talk about some of that stuff there too, when it comes to pro audio, I like what you said there about looking towards some of the true pro audio category. I mean, let's face it, the speakers used at a outdoor concert venue or something are obviously they need to throw a certain distance and disperse a certain way and carry sound a far distance, etc. But it's not just about volume for them. Obviously, the artist and everyone involved wants it to sound a certain way and sound good. And so I love what you said there about us kind of looking more towards that true pro audio PA style rather than just pro audio car audio. So I think that's an important point. So with all that being said, like, what do you see looking ahead? If Gary was able to glance into his 12-volt crystal ball, what would we see coming from Audio Control next, Gary? What do you got cooking?
Do you want me to keep that in the pro audio realm, or expand
Yeah,
beyond
I
that?
mean, I think we're mostly focused on pro
Yeah.
audio today, so don't give away too much, but yeah, tell us what you got coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, so right now we are shipping the 6X, which is our full size 6-inch driver, our 6S, which is the shallow I showed you. We have an 8-inch driver. Coming shortly will be a 3-inch neodymium tweeter and then a 4-inch like bullet style tweeter. Those will be
Hmm.
followed up by a 6.5 and a 6x9 coax, plus a 6x9
Ooh,
mid bass. So that's kind of
nice.
the near future. And then the long future will be, I would say that there are some step up drivers from here coming. So this is we wanted to hit the broadest part of the market. And again, our goal is always to provide value, and like the tagline says, making good sound great. Like we want somebody that buys our speakers or any of our products to feel like they paid less than they would have going and getting the same sound from another supplier, and that we've built it with quality. That being said, there is plenty of room above this price point to play, and we're taking everything we learned here and cranking it up a notch, and that's kind of what's going on in the background. No ETAs or timelines, but some pretty stout specification documentation at this point. We'll just say we're about to go into some prototyping of some new stuff, and I'm excited to see what comes out of that round.
Wow. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that was some amazing insight from Stinger and Audio Control's Director of Audio, Gary Bell. I want to take this opportunity just to thank Gary for coming on and sharing his wealth of knowledge with us today. It's so cool to kind of get a peek behind the scenes sometimes. We don't always get that in this industry. So for more information, on anything that you saw or heard about today in today's CMA workshop, be sure to check out audiocontrol.com and be on the lookout for some of that really cool new pro audio gear coming to a shop near you. So thanks so much for checking out today's workshop, and we'll see you on the next one.